Hello everybody. So, what is non-duality? It's not a thing, it's not applicable, has no purpose, has no utility. Trying to act as if there is no me is just nonsense, misunderstanding what this is about. Thinking this makes something is also nonsense. There aren't non-dual people and dual people. Even when this happens, when there's a so-called shift, for me, the word non-duality is just completely and totally empty. I wouldn't have even chosen it or used it, but it's just like a sign above the door to say this is what we're kind of talking about, nothing more. So it's really just a suggestion that there is just life happening for no one, freely, simply appearing as whatever is appearing in every sense that the person would label as different things, such as thoughts and feelings and bodies and rooms and walls and spaces and sky and nature. There's just boom, appearance, which is nothing being everything with no separation. So as much as a tree is a thought can appear, and this is talking about immediacy. It's so immediate, so instant, that there's no space for time. And there's no space for a me. The I, the me, the self, the you, the we is an assumption based on what we could call fake news, a misinterpretation of a collection of signals, feeling the skin, thoughts are interpreted as coming from a center. The appearance of another body, that there must be an object, a subject creates the object. The subject is assumed to have the thoughts, to have feelings. And it's just slightly missed what's actually simply happening by itself. for no reason, no purpose, no meaning. Freely, unencumbered. And free, this is an unconditional freedom. So when there's an assumption that in order to be enlightened, I have to get to a state, then that's a condition. It can't be this. It has to be when, for example, I have no more thoughts, or I feel great all the time, or my external life will be perfect. It always comes with a set of conditions, and even macro conditions, always rejecting the very simplicity of this, whatever is appearing. Comfort, discomfort, positive thought, negative thought. When the subject falls asleep or dies or is no longer, there's an apparent dropping of labeling that isn't that's not an absolute or prescriptive. Without a subject, there's just no longer the need to constantly position everything, which is kind of coming from a sense of insecurity that I have to constantly be aware, conscious, alert, because it's being separate feels alone and separate from the world, so in danger. And it might not even be understood because it's like, oh, there's not a tiger jumping out at me, but in danger of, oh, what if this happens? If I don't earn money, then I'll end up homeless and then I'll end up dead. And so if I'm not constantly alert of what's going on around me, I could be attacked. There's this constant sense of awareness that if I'm not aware, I will die. And the cosmic joke is that there never was and never is a person, a me, a center. It's all dancing freely by itself. And immediacy is a bit like the alien in the movie Alien and Aliens. It's stuck right on your face. It's immediate. There's no gap. So enlightenment, awakening, no self is already done. It's done. There's nothing to do, nothing to get, nothing to achieve. And of course the sense of self or I is the sense of separation, and that sense of separation is a sense, by being separate, of incompleteness, which means lacking. So no matter what, it has a sense that it needs something more, which, depending on the particular body, will be more spiritual knowledge, more stillness, more awareness, greater consciousness, more loving, more money, more possessions, more friends, and all of these movements are resisting or rejecting the ordinariness of what is, that is already whole and complete. It's just life. When this dance is happening, self or no self, it's irrelevant. It's not. Wholeness can't see a problem with separation. So what appears to happen, so what I've just explained is what's sometimes called a direct message. I don't really care. Again, labels are just labels, because this is always it. But in this dance, what appears is that as this is obvious, that there is no real two, there's no separation with anything, then characters and behaviors can either not change at all or radically change when there's a shift. And this is a bit of a story because it's expressing it in a sort of a timeline, but there is a flow, but it's always this, but this is always this part of life, this realm is constant change. Change. So the character can also change. And it's okay if it doesn't, and it's okay if it does. Again, there's no rule. What has seemingly happened here was more of a radical change. Again, on some levels and on other levels not, but when you no longer see other people, everything just is life without separation, the behavior with those people seemingly changes. So from here it's not recognized, but it can be recognized by others who may have known me since I was younger or whatever. So things like when there's a feeling of separateness, there's kind of a sense of what do I have and what do I don't have. And with people, for example, who are intelligent, they will want to express that intelligence a lot and in a way win arguments and dominate other people, because it feels like it's a weapon in their artillery or in their arsenal. But when you see that there's nowhere to get, this is it. This is just life expressing itself in all of its variety. that there's no above and below. There's no argument to win. Being right is empty. It might happen, it might not happen, and it just has no importance. So a lot of apparent people walk around thinking that they have to be right and they have to win an argument and they have to show you a piece of their mind. And that may on some occasions still arise. But for example, here it just doesn't really make sense anymore. There's just no energy there to want to win. And like the Buddha talked about the balance, it doesn't mean you become a pushover. It doesn't mean because you don't need to be right that you're always going to be wrong. The mind in separation, or just the energy of separation, gives a sense that there's either or. And actually life is always two sides of the same coin, night and day, female and male, up and down, and they're just two sides of the same coin. For someone to be right, someone has to be wrong. So sometimes there's a sense that in a job or whatever, something has to be done in order to progress. So that might still urge you to impress onto somebody, no, this has to happen this way. Not that I'm trying to be right, but this has to happen this way. But in the need to debate and to constantly question just crumbles. And if anything occurs, it's more of a playfulness, the fun of it. But every discussion you can ever have never gets anywhere. It's blah, 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 and then dies. And there's a beauty and freedom in that. That it's just like birds singing. So again, it's not a state achieved or a way of being or a way of thinking. That's all nonsense seen from the perspective of a separate self that can't help but think that it is solid and it has empathy and compassion and love and it has all these qualities. It doesn't. This is empty. And in life, in movement, there is an expression of compassion that arises in the moment. Nobody has compassion. Compassion is an action which can be either expressed by sitting next to somebody peacefully, giving them a hug, talking with them softly. These words can never touch what life is, but it's fine to have these words to be able to communicate with each other, but the communication between people is just fun and playful and not trying to get anywhere. not trying to prove anything. So with the absence of a sense of me, it's not perfect, but it tends to be softer, more gentle, but anything can arise. I found it's, especially as a man, this opened a door of vulnerability, that it's free to express its vulnerability to anybody, free to cry or laugh. And one beautiful thing is that the idea of being coherent and consistent, that went, and so there's just babbling on, and there's just no need for it to make sense or to be heard by people in a particular way, or what are people going to think of me if. So a lot of people are having conversations and either thinking of what their response is going to be rather than just listening, or thinking, oh, how's this person perceiving me with what I've just said? And it's just all nonsense that goes on, constantly worrying about me, myself and I. So the liberation from that, when there's just emptiness looking out eyes, emptiness moving, it's just simple, plain, very ordinary. And I find there's more interest in being absorbed by a room or by a sky or by a tree than needing to get somewhere, talk to someone, have to do something. There's just the enjoyment of whatever is appearing. Because when there's the separate eyes, is the illusion of time and space. So it's constantly worrying about what's next. And in order to figure out what next, it might refer to what it thinks has been. So there's a constant checking. And in a way, that self is like an extrapolation. So it cuts itself out around this apparent border and projects itself into the past and projects itself into the future about what did I do, what happened to me, what am I going to do, what's going to happen to me. And it's missing the big picture. It's missing life, being that there's no border here and that this without the room, the walls, the sky. It's all one, or wholeness, and there isn't one without the other, that it's boom. So the interest in the story of me, of where I've come from and where I'm going, is gone. And there's, instead of looking in an illusional, extracted, directional manner, it's opened its eyes to, oh wow, there's all of this. But it's so ordinary that the me just overlooks it constantly, like a horse with blinkers. It's so busy in its day, thinking I have to do this and this and this and this, that it is not absorbing the changing sky, the moving of the leaves and the trees, the feeling of air on the skin. So I'm just telling this as just talking about it as lightly and fun. It's not prescriptive. It's not saying you have to do this. It's just more there's an apparent shift from this cut out me linear existence to a more broad, wow, just a wonderment of, oh, there's air, there's sensation, which isn't a rule. There can still be, oh, I have to book a plane ticket or I have to book a train ticket, and that just happens. So it's everything. It's paying bills, it's washing dishes, and it's just sitting in wonder. Sipping a coffee is, you could say, nothing enjoying coffee, or the universe enjoying coffee. I would also say feelings are no longer pushed away or barricaded, so they're actually more full on. But again, this is the paradox. They're completely intense and completely full on when they arise by themselves. Unknowingly, they just appear in immediacy. And they also seemingly disappear quite rapidly because there's nothing to stick to. When there's a story of why am I upset, why am I sad, that's a whole emotion going with apparently the sadness is not okay. When there's just sadness, it's just a sensation, a feeling, and then that just drops. It comes and goes. So like Rumi wrote something about all your emotions. You are a guest house, and all the emotions are your guests. Welcome them all into the guest house, and welcome them at the table. When there is sorrow, meet that sorrow fully and wholly, because it is there to teach you. So although non-duality is often spoken as just the radical non-duality which I exposed in the beginning, it is that simple, direct message. Because this has been many, many years since the shift, the fundamental reality is that we don't know. When it's clear and obvious that we're living in an unknowing, then there's an openness to discovery, to learning. So every person that you meet, every emotion that arises, not by a necessity because I need to learn something from this. It's just as it's there, it inherently teaches you. And its mysteries are very intimate, and it's almost impossible for me to express what the depths of sadness or the depths of sorrow have taught, other than the darkness, or what some people will call the negative, is not an enemy. It's it's really there, showing us. If we see the darkness, we realize that we are the light, and it's not the arrogant light of ego saying, "Look at me." It's the it's like being a buoy on an ocean that if you pull it down, it will automatically rise up to the surface because that's its inherent nature, that it's filled with air. And so, as in Archimedes' principle, it will rise. As sadness or sorrow or grief or whatever more dense emotion arises, its contrast is showing us that buoyancy, that we are actually the absolute lightness, that if we weren't the transparent emptiness and the lightness, we couldn't feel that contrast of heaviness. So the existence of the heaviness is showing us that we are the light, the lightness, the emptiness. And that the light never fears a shadow. It just keeps on shining. So again, this is not about being, oh, look at me, I'm perfect, and I shine light onto the world. It's just a very intimate boundlessness, and at the same time totally impersonal. So again, these are paradoxes that, as I mentioned earlier, the self sees an either or. We are eternal and human mortal. So there is paradox, there is duality, but it is never actually separate. But understanding, the people who talk about duality the most are seekers, because when there's just no more separation, talking about what is dual and non-dual, it just doesn't make any sense, and it just doesn't need to be said. So people in non-duality who are seeking often start saying, oh, but now I'm telling a story, now I'm being dual, or that's dual. Half the time I don't know what you're talking about, because it's just another way of trying to divide things and separate things and classify things. None of that is necessary. And there's no problem with saying, oh, that's my phone, that's a glass, because that is the way communication can happen, and isn't that a wonderful thing that we can communicate to each other and say, even though time doesn't exist and space doesn't exist and objects don't exist, we could still say, I'll meet you at the bus stop at 4 o'clock so we can get the bus to go to Barcelona. So there's no problem with the measurement of time, or saying to somebody, let's meet at a place. So yeah. So I hope this helps maybe untangle that the undescribable simplicity of this appearing as whatever it's appearing as. No problem with saying I, because the words are just empty anyway. So there already is nowhere to get, nothing to become. There's just this. So peace and love.